Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, you lovely folks visiting the Goblin Reserve channel. My name is Scott, also known as HowlingMines on the internet, and I'm joined today by the lovely Shahmir Samee, who you might recognise from a Pro Tour top 4. He's quite good at Flesh and Blood. Thankfully, we've been asked to come and do some commentary here for a very important game of Flesh and Blood for Amy and Hank over here on the channel for their box versus box series, and we couldn't be happier to do so. That being said, of course, we are very lucky that we are a UK pairing who love to do commentary, and we're really passionate about Flesh and Blood, not only being able to tell people's stories, but follow people that are incredible in the community, and all in all, we just want to do some more commentary on some more games. So if that's the kind of thing you're looking for, we'd also love to hear from you. If you want to get in contact with me, you can find me on every social media platform at HowlingMines. Shahmir, where can they find you?
You can find me probably pretty easily on Twitter at Shahmir Samee, otherwise on Discord at Pokélop.
Perfect stuff. We're really looking forward to this one. Hopefully you enjoy the game as much as we do. Enjoy the video. Welcome back, folks, to the finals of the coveted Golden Goblin Chalice event here over on YouTube. I'm HowlingMines. This is the incredible Shahmir Samee coming back for the finals of a prestigious event. And honestly, I don't think we could ask for a better finals pairing. It's not just like opponents that know each other. We're talking husband versus wife.
It is quite the dynamic duo to have in this final indeed. And two players with a very storied history with one another beyond the game itself. But within the game of Flesh and Blood, we have Amy, who took a pretty early lead when it came to this little rivalry. When it came to their kind of blitz pre-constructed rivalry, she was really tearing it up on Prism. But Hank has clawed back with this box versus box series, and we've seen him dominate so far with both of the box versus box series that we've seen so far. So can he take the third, or is this Amy's chance to come back? We will see.
Definitely will. It's an interesting spot we find ourselves in. As you say, Amy kind of renowned for beating up Hank in tournaments when playing Prism, and she's lucky enough to be able to do so again in this incredible box versus box format. Best possible chance at taking home that trophy. Really great format, this one. If you're looking for a similar event yourself, sealed matches of box versus box are really simple. They're 40 card decks, no card quality restrictions, and we're playing with young heroes. So think of it like a sealed or a draft, but with a super increased power level, so players can kind of really get to grips with the power behind Flesh and Blood. Amy, as we say here, playing an incredible looking Prism list. Shahmir, tell me all about it.
Like, if I had this in a draft, just write the 3-0 down and move along. This is the most juiced Prism deck I think I will ever see in a 40 card limited based format. So we're looking at some of the real hits here. I mean, 3 Heralds of Protection. It might be a common, but it's probably the most important common you could want to see as Prism. And having 3 in the red slot, 1 in the yellow slot, and 1 in the blue slot. I mean, how could you have a better start than that? But it does get better. Look at that copy of Phantasmaclasm up in the red slot, the Rouse the Ancients in the blue slot, and the Prismatic Shield. I mean, this deck just has it all. What is there left to add?
Very much the case. A great box as far as I'm concerned if I was in Amy's seat, but don't go writing off Hank just yet, because as much as Hank is battling his wife, he's playing the character known for fighting for his wife. He's on Bolton, and this deck is honestly looking pretty fantastic too. Maybe not the raw numbers of a deck like Prism, but we've got a lot of the powerful commons you're looking for if you're the one playing Bolton. Most importantly, 7 copies of Take Flight. That natural go again, going to be fantastic at helping Hank chain together big go wide turns that maybe Prism doesn't find it the most easy to defend. We've got some poppers kind of lined up here as well. Poppers super important when playing against Prism. A nice little variety of them in this case as well. Kind of some Majestics shining out here in the form of Boltwind Blade, Nourishing Emptiness, joined by a pair of Invigorating Lights. A couple of other real all-stars in this deck too. Soul Shield might very well come in handy at sucking up one of those big heralds, and a single copy of Spillblood maybe allowing us to have some sneaky dominate in the endgame. So with all that being said, this one really can come down to the wire, and it's make or break for these two who really are neck and neck in their competitive series so far. I'm looking forward to seeing how it breaks down. With that said, I've got it in my ear. We're ready to go to the floor. Let's take a look at this all-important final match. Okay, so shuffling up here, Shahmir, not too many surprises in terms of the equipment layout we were expecting here. Kind of briefly alluded to some of the full loadouts in the deck list, but important pieces of equipment on the table here as well. Halo for both players, but also those arm slots, Gallantry Gold and Dreamweavers.
Yeah, I think Gallantry Gold is going to be really critical for Hank here. It really is one of the all-star cards that just out of nowhere can suddenly give you a power turn as Bolton, despite having very little preparation. Just one resource to make sure that your axes get +1 this turn, which means you can very easily give them go again with all the soul that you have stored up. Meanwhile, for Prism, those Dreamweavers, if we can have one really stacked up Herald that just can't afford to be popped, those Dreamweavers are going to come in clutch.
So, looks like we have a die roll win for Amy here, choosing to go second, letting Hank go first, and one of those 7 take flights turning up in the first hand, already getting to work, already going wide.
Indeed, it's a pretty aggressive start here, but you do want to try and strip some cards here. I mean, and more importantly for Bolton, perhaps, build up some soul when you get the chance.
Okay, looks like we are definitely going with that super aggressive start here. Battlefield Blitz coming on down following this take flight. Gonna have go again because we've charged. Looks like we're taking the other 2 cards from Amy's hand here, meaning we are gonna leak some damage on turn 0, courtesy of that hatchet.
Not bad at all. We might be forsaking the arsenal for it, but getting 2 damage on turn 0, that's more than you get most of the time. Plus, that soul is still stored up. But let's see what Amy can return with.
Really solid turn 0 for Hank there, but we draw up for Amy, and of course, these big heralds, not always the easiest thing for Bolton to deal with, might find himself under pressure immediately. This hand looking fantastic here. Transmogrify, some Herald of Protections, and that Prismatic Shield.
Phantasmify into a red Herald of Protection. It doesn't get much bigger than this, truth be told. But Amy's taken a pretty big risk. She's chosen not to pop the Dreamweavers here, despite leaving herself very vulnerable to a popper. Let's see if Hank has drawn one of those 4 that hopefully, maybe he can capitalize on that little bit of overconfidence there.
This is definitely a huge start. Interesting to see Amy kind of saving those Dreamweavers, maybe kind of prioritizing one of those Dominate Heralds in the late game, more worried about squeaking in that last little bit of damage. But early confidence here, maybe aware that Hank doesn't have that many poppers to work with. This is 7 + 5. This is 12 damage coming in this case off this Herald. And if there's no popper on the other side, that's really rather hard to stop.
Yeah, looking at the hand cam, I am not seeing one, but I think the only consolation prize here is that Hank's hand does have 12 block in it, so we could be seeing a full block out here without spending equipment, which I think is pretty significant given, I mean, this is probably the biggest on-hit that Prism can have in the format. A Spectral Shield left over is not just 1 damage prevention, but it also represents a little weapon that you can be swinging for 4 with go again every turn if she gets to protect it.
A super important Herald in this spot. You never like to be where Hank was there. Just turn 1, already the hands on the temples. Oh, where am I? This is horrible. Really strong start here for Amy. But as you say, that Soul Shield likely to do some heavy lifting here. Gives us some options. Maybe lets us keep a couple of cards to work with if we want to be able to attack back. Or as you say, more importantly, might let us block this thing out entirely and stop that follow-up Spectral Shield from causing so much trouble. Hank really going through the ringer here, and you can see why this seems like a super important early decision.
You know, I think there's a really sneaky line here. I'm not sure if Hank is going to see it, but he can actually give himself the opportunity to possibly draw a popper here by pitching a blue to activate the Halo of Illumination. If he takes that line, it would be huge.
Oh,
but I think he's just elected to go for the block 12, which is the safe route, but maybe neglecting to pitch for that Soul Shield?
Maybe? It does feel like that has a somewhat balanced cost to it, would you believe?
I mean, I'll take a 0 for 6 defense reaction that goes to my soul. Yeah,
that card's way better than I remember it being.
Holy moly, constructed staple, baby.
Can you
In
imagine?
any case, the players are proceeding with play. Okay, so we have an arsenal there, which, you know, maybe in another world wouldn't have been there, but in this world, it's here.
For sure. Worth keeping that in mind, folks, of course, as players kind of get to grips with things, especially in a finals like this one. So much play happening for the rest of the day. Mistakes do happen, and it's important to kind of get your head back into the right kind of game space if you find yourself in one of those positions. As you say, Hank passing back here within Arsenal does give, again, Amy this kind of ability to have full breathing room with Prism here. Now, back in the day in Constructed, this would have been maybe a little bit more dangerous thanks to a card like Luminaris, but when there's no auras in play, it can actually be quite hard for young Prism to use her entire 4-card hand in this limited format.
But you know what Prism loves to see when she has a 4 cards to play with? She loves that Spears of Surreality that's in the hand, because that is going to help her leverage all those cards for some serious damage output. Of course, assuming that Hank isn't able to trigger the Phantasm on it and stop her turn in its tracks.
Yeah, Spears, one of those fantastic cards in this format. Really high pick if you find yourself drafting. We're not going that way, though. Going to save that Spears for later, using it this time to pay for a red Prismatic Shield. Now, this is another Haymaker common for Prism in this limited format. Why is it so good, Shahmir?
Well, remember that little Prismatic Shield that I said could be a 4 with Go Again? Yeah, imagine that 3 times over, because I think that might be what we're looking at this turn. If Amy gets to present 12 points of damage with Go Again off of this 5-card hand, and still keep the 3 Spectral Shields, which represents 3 damage prevention, I mean, the value is just off the charts, folks. It looks like we're only going for 2 attacks here, but that's plenty enough.
That's still a pretty good turn, as you say. All gas, no breaks here. Boltyn, kind of a deck that's known for needing a variety of cards to really get its big turns going, and that can make blocking out these awkward breakpoints and still having a powerful turn quite difficult. We see Hank choosing to take that first Spectral Shield, lose a little bit of life, use it as a resource, and then kind of consult what this full 5-card hand can do before deciding if they're taking the extra 4 here. We've got a few options, a couple of Express Lightnings that take flight. I could definitely see us blocking, or maybe keeping the whole lot and going very wide.
Indeed. I think we've got the Arsenal stocked up with across the line there, which is I'm probably not going to be doing much other than possibly maybe ending a chain rather than choosing to start it here. But Hank's got plenty of soul stocked up here. And really, as Boltyn, this is exactly what you want. You want to be building soul in the early game so that when you see the window, when you see, yes, these are the cards that I want to be just deploying all of them on attack in one turn, you have the Go Again stashed in your soul ready to use it.
Definitely the power of Boltyn, having that reserve to be able to go wide when required, and it looks like that's the choice we're making. That second shield connecting, putting Hank down to 12 early here. All pressure coming in from Amy so far, some really big turns. I feel like Boltyn's going to need an equally sized follow-up to pull themselves back into this. The perks here, however, those shields are exceptionally fragile, and if we are going wide, it could be quite hard to keep them safe to keep attacking with.
Indeed, but the value, I feel like the value has already been had on those shields. You know what? I'll take 8 damage and however much damage prevention they offer me, I'll take that all the way to the bank. So we're opening up with that cross the line, which is maybe a bit of a suspicious play from if you're sitting on Amy's side of the table here.
For sure. If you're sitting in a spot like this, Shahmir, does this smell like it has to be a combat trick to you? Do you block in order to kind of facilitate that if that's something you're interested in? Or do you just make them have it?
Well, I mean, and let's think of it this way, right? Hank in that situation had the opportunity to block 2 different attacks in a way that would have been pretty efficient for his card usage overall. But he chose not to here. And then suddenly he opens up with this attack, which doesn't have Go Again to begin with. So it kind of says, well, what's left in your hand that you felt so confident that you could use all of your cards this turn? I think that's maybe telegraphing that Courageous Steel hand that's slinking away in that hand.
Certainly seems to be. Definitely hard to rationalize keeping a hand without any natural Go Again if we don't have a way of working our way around that. This Express Lightning is going to earn the other 2 cards in the hand here, giving Hank that option again to spend a little bit more soul, get some Go Again if we want to send those hatchets swinging and take out those Spectral Shields. Or maybe we can just use that Steel hand to come over the top.
Yeah, Amy seems pretty committed to protecting these shields here, which I don't think is a strategy that I often see deployed against Boltyn. But who knows? It could really tide her all the way to victory here. Let's see how Hank chooses to capitalize.
Interesting decision here. I like this quite a lot, actually. Saving this steel hand for a bigger turn when you might need a way of getting go again. Get yourself out of an awkward situation seems very, very powerful. Amy giving up their hand here early. We're choosing to really hammer that hatchet through. Looks like we're maybe giving it go again and trying to push as much damage as we can while those shields are, while in play, metaphorically down.
You know, it's spending the soul here, which is a bit of a risk, right? Going into a turn with no soul as Bolton can sometimes put you in a position where you draw something that you really wanted to be able to give go again, and suddenly you lose the resources to do it. But let's look at what Hank's getting in this exchange. So he's getting the 3 damage off the steel hand on its own. Great, that's a fine start. He's clearing the spectral shield, which, as we've already discussed, could be a long-term threat in the game. But he's also now getting the opportunity to give that axe go again and spend the errant resource left over on a second axe and get 3 more damage out of the deal just for free at the cost of that 1 card in soul.
I think this is a fantastic little read as well. Pretty clear from the early blocks in this turn that Amy wanted to keep those shields alive. And you might not always have perfect information about your opponent's deck list, and if they're that willing to give you a 4-card hand to keep those 3 shields around, clearly they're very valuable to them. So spending a turn like that, pushing through damage, getting those life totals much closer, and getting rid of those shields, seems like it could be a really big tempo swing, especially with Amy having to pass straight back.
Indeed, the tempo swung all the way back around here. In Hank's position, this is exactly the point where you want, there it is, a red take flight, because that is going to let you keep building up soul, using your hand efficiently, and keep presenting some damage so you get to leverage that pressure, keep moving forward, and keep the tempo.
Kind of the perfect tool here. Definitely making sure we don't get punished for using that soul last turn. Gives us a soul back, and with that natural go again means that we still have the ability to go slightly wider this time. Hank debating which of these 2 cards to charge here between the Cross the Line and the Express Lightning. Chooses to keep the Lightning tucked away for maybe now, maybe a bit later on.
Amy's definitely got to find her way back in here. But the good news is, with those heralds, Prism has plenty of tools to be able to kind of needle her way back in, or maybe smash her way back in with something like a massive Herald of Protection like we saw earlier. Interestingly, though, we haven't seen any of those poppers that we know are in Hank's deck, so maybe if she makes too much of a gamble, she could get pretty punished by relying too much on her attack with Phantasm.
For sure. Can't say I'm too surprised by this. Bit of a shame to see the Rouse the Ancients having to be used to block here. Kind of a tool that could be great for a go-wide turn later, but that's not something Prism always has to do. She can definitely just play 2-card Herald hands as well if you're not scared of those poppers. Looks like we're giving a lot of respect to this take flight. Maybe a little worried about some of the damage coming this turn. Definitely feels like we kind of are looking to play strategic 2-card hands here to try and take some of this tempo back from Hank.
I think one of the most important things to understand when you're playing against Bolton is that once you start reaching a low life total and you lose the choice of whether to block, that's when his first hero power, where the attacks are getting plus power as long as he's charged this turn, that's when it really, really begins to shine and all of his attacks start becoming very, very powerful. So really choosing the window in which you take damage in order to return damage can be very important.
Very much agree with that. Really interesting decision here for Hank as well, choosing to run out this Express Lightning when it's definitely not guaranteed to be blocked in any way or have any way of giving it go again. What do we think about this as compared to saving it for a later turn?
I think it's a pretty aggressive approach here. Maybe when you see that your opponent is so willing to block your take flight this turn, then you are more interested in kind of putting them in more awkward positions where it's like, okay, well, if you want to block this, you're going to be leaking damage. Whereas blocking an axe could be putting a 3 block in front of it, the axe gets boosted to 3, and then nothing's going through. Whereas I think Hank is really just trying to maximize the damage output this turn. And we're seeing Amy just being forced to kind of take that damage despite maybe not wanting to this turn.
Yeah, it looks like there was definitely some deliberation there between blocking with that Herald or taking this extra 3 damage. It definitely seems like it's worth keeping this 2-card hand if it's going to be able to threaten the Herald back. That which it does, it's a big old red Herald of Protection. That's exactly what Amy needs to kind of claw some tempo back in a spot like this.
But there's Chekhov's gun. There's one of those poppers that we were talking about.
Oh, the Bolton Blade turning up at exactly the right time. Hank having a laugh about it. Amy definitely not looking particularly happy about that. Herald of Protection getting shut down for just 1 card here, meaning that tempo staying with Hank yet again.
Yeah, it turns out Phantasm really isn't a weakness until suddenly it is, and then you lose it all.
Yeah, it's definitely worth remembering for those folks out there that maybe aren't the biggest fans of illusionists. I promise, those attacks aren't huge for free. There is a very noticeable downside if you're able to dispel the illusion. Engulfing Light, the start of the turn here in this case, once again, definitely threatening a bit of a go wide turn if we want to block, but maybe a smaller turn we can steal pressure back if we're willing to let this damage leak through yet again. But we're only working with half our life total here. This is getting a little bit dangerous.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about Engulfing Light as a card is it feels really hard to be in a position where you're treating it correctly. Because if it hits and you declare no blocks, like Amy's doing here, and it hits, well, they just kind of get to charge up their soul even more, which is kind of maybe what they wanted to do. But if you're blocking it, well, maybe it's going to leak damage anyway because it hits a breakpoint. And then they can go wide and still get their extra soul. Like, what are you supposed to do in the face of that?
Definitely offers some flexibility for those Bolton players out there, both in constructed and limited. But taking that damage does mean that that turn does come up short. We pass back to Amy. A little bit behind here in terms of life total, but life is a fantastic resource in the game of Flesh and Blood, and we are going to use it. We're bumping up our damage yet again. Enigma Chimera coming in this time. Once again, Dreamweavers being saved for later, just looking to push raw numbers in this spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I think Dreamweavers so often tend to be spent in a spot where you get to make sure that you get to leverage or get value out of multiple cards in your hand, which means it often comes on a turn with, say, a Spears of Surreality or a Phantasmify. Amy here is saying, nope, I am saving these for something that you have no idea what's coming. And frankly, we don't either. So I look forward to seeing what these do get spent
It
on
is a
because it is going to be
terrifying
one
thought.
heck of an attack.
For sure. If you're in a situation here when you're Hank and your opponent's thrown some 12 damage Herald, some 11 power Enigma Chimera, it's something that Bolton just cannot do or necessarily handle particularly well without a popper, and those aren't going to earn your Dreamweavers, well, what is lurking for you down there in the depths of the deck? Gallantry Gold looks like its block value being expended pretty quickly here, but the rest of these blocks not looking so simple.
Indeed. I mean, the fact that this attack is threatening lethal on its own already. I mean, Hank definitely is in a position where he's got to block with something. And going to one against Prism is certainly a strategy that you could take. I could see a world in which he chooses to keep the 5 cards here. But Prism is one of the very few heroes in this set who can actually deal damage at instant speed with the help of something like a Merciful Retribution, which, sure, maybe it's not in Amy's deck here. Maybe the players know that if it's an open decklist format. But could you risk it if you don't know that?
Definitely something that's worth keeping in mind. Those sneaky situations you find yourself in with cards like Merciful, maybe in a hero like Riptide and his traps in a different sealed format. There are ways that opponents that can't normally damage you at instant speed can definitely pick those last points of damage and tear you apart when you're least expecting it. Hank kind of going through the ringer here a bit, does want to respect this Enigma Chimera. Giving up a take flight definitely kind of suggests that we have a functional 3-card hand here, and we're worried about kind of maybe not being blocked on our first attack as Bolton and not getting full value out of this if we don't use some of these cards to block.
Hank has got so much soul stocked up here. The card that I'm really looking forward to him drawing is that Spill Blood, because when he does, ooh boy, we might be looking at a big turn.
Spill Blood, definitely a powerful Majestic to have in a spot like this. One that definitely hasn't turned up yet, though. We are going to be engulfing some light here once again. That soul getting stocked up even further, kind of adding more to Hank's options as this game goes on. And once again, Amy finding herself in that same spot as before. Can we afford to take another head jab to the face, or do we block this and potentially let another attack come in afterwards?
Ooh, the move to reactions, the do you have it? Oof.
Definitely.
Going up to 5.
Does in fact potentially have it here. Courageous Steel Hand coming in clutch again, jumping that number up in this case, forcing through more damage. Amy falling down to 2. Thankfully, no insane follow-up here because there's no more resources to attack Amy again. 2 life is not a lot to work with, and definitely in danger zone, but we have a full 5-card hand to work with here on the way back. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Amy manages to put together.
But there's that Spill Blood, and while we haven't seen any of the armor expended, ooh, okay, all right, we've got to play here. Here's those Dreamweavers coming up.
Yeah, this is definitely the spot where the fear of God comes back into you. If you were worried about what those weavers were being saved for, you are about to find out. It looks like it's a Herald of Tenacity here. The Dominate we kind of alluded to earlier here, definitely super impactful and going to be hard to stop with one card this time.
Indeed, looks like Hank is going to be forced into a position of taking some damage here, and maybe more critically, allowing that Herald to hit and sending it into Prism's Soul, which I think might give Amy a bit more of a shot of surviving the onslaught that might be coming up.
Definitely an ability overlooked by some with Prism. Quite easy to forget. She has the ability to spend those extra resources on both players' turns to make some shields. Not only weapons, but also ways of soaking up damage moving forward as well. You've got to be asking yourself here, my opponent kept 5 cards. What's the follow-up plan after this Herald? Is it getting bigger somehow? Is there a shield coming at me somehow with an extra action point? Maybe that Halo of Illumination lets us pull some tricks that maybe we can't be 100% certain of. A lot of things got to be going through Hank's mind here.
I'll say if I see this in constructed, my alarm bell moment is that's a pummel. You've got a pummel lined up, and I am terrified at that point.
I think, thankfully for all of us, Pummel not a card we have to worry about in the Monarch Limited format, for better or for worse. But definitely looks like Hank is worried about something here. That Spillblood, super enticing when you find yourself in a spot like this, but seems exceptionally scared of losing the game to this Herald and a little extra juice over the top, thinking through all their options. What will they have left if they keep a hand here? Looks like we're quite light on resources with this 4-card hand. Maybe we just can't afford to be playing with that blood.
You know, I think one thing that's I found really interesting so far is that both players are being very, very diligent with their use of equipment. We haven't seen either of the pieces of Ironhide deployed, and perhaps more surprisingly, we haven't seen the Halo popped on either of them. And that tends to be like a first turn of the game. Yeah, I'll use my Halo. Let's go. I'll get some soul. But no, these players are sticking it out here. They want that Halo for something specific.
Kinda love to see it, to be honest. Armor equipment, just especially in a limited environment, just super valuable at covering breakpoints, letting you keep hands that can't function if you block with extra cards. And so as a result, definitely often rewarded for saving it until the latest possible scenario, and kind of buying yourself that perfect window. Both players giving themselves the opportunity to do that here, holding on to all that armor block. This Herald is definitely, I think, maybe the kind of game-deciding decision point here. Hank kind of definitely having to consider his options. His hand seems super powerful, but it seems very hard to pay for everything. And I just can't see a way where I'm not dead here if I let this Herald hit me.
Well, I think I think I heard a no blocks there. That looked confident. Oh, and we're down to 2-2 here. Okay.
That is a heck of a bluff to call if you're in Hank's shoes. Big old powerful hand to work with. Your opponent kind of represented the ability to kind of do everything with their hand by not blocking you last turn. Takes a lot of gusto to put yourself in that spot. We've got the Halo here, popping a card into Soul and drawing up in this case. Looks like the plan here might be to make that sneaky shield on this turn and then make another shield courtesy of that Herald going into our Soul.
Yeah, I really love the way that Prism can do this. Like, you have 1 card left over at the end of your turn. Oh, that's all right. Just becomes a Spectral Shield. That's not so bad, is it? That's 1 point of value, but if you get to keep that Spectral Shield, it's a lot more than 1 point when it becomes a Hammer for 4 with Go Again.
Certainly can be. Thankfully, a yellow card drawn there off the Halo, so not in any danger of being unable to do that. This does mean that, again, secretly, extra kind of damage prevention locked up on the board here if Amy needs it. We've still got 4 block of armor and potentially 2 damage prevention from 2 Spectral Shields if we've got spare cards to work with, and that might be all she needs to give her enough breathing room to get through a card like Spillblood.
Ooh, but it looks like here's the Spillblood not just on its own, but with that Gallantry Gold paired with it. I think we're going to see some very big axes swung in a second.
Kind of the beauty of Warrior, just the kind of fundamental needs to make those weapons as powerful as possible, and it's lovely to see weapons getting additional kind of really funky bonuses in a set kind of like Monarch. When we're playing Limited, hatchets maybe don't see too much play outside of Limited, and kind of watching the unique way they blend together with a card like Spillblood, it's just something you don't really see anywhere else.
Indeed, we have just enough resources here to be able to swing both axes with this Spillblood buff on them. So we should be looking at 5 Dominate with Go Again into 6 with Dominate. That's some damage.
That is a heck of an outlay, and definitely a testament as to why Spill Blood is such a solid finisher in a limited format like this. But really good to see Amy getting rewarded here for their early choices. This blue going to be fantastic at paying for armor, potentially for making more spectral shields and soaking up that Dominate, something that, if that armor had been used earlier on, simply wouldn't be able to be survived.
All right, we're opting to use the second piece of Ironhide here. We've got to be seeing a card from hand blocking as well. There goes the other Spears of Surreality. Oof, that's got to be painful.
Definitely a bit of a sad one, I think, for Amy in this case. Those spears, some of the best kind of go-wide tools that Prism has access to, and giving them up here to kind of survive this onslaught, definitely a huge shame. But the important part, the onslaught has been survived. Something I didn't think we were going to manage through a copy of Spill Blood, giving Amy the chance to find another one of those powerful Herald-style turns and get themselves back into this game.
I mean, there's still a card in Amy's arsenal here and a card in hand, if I've tracked this correctly, which means we still could be just throwing a Herald for anywhere between 5 and 7 damage, possibly with an on-hit. I mean, she's not only survived this turn, I think this turn might have flipped the tempo in her favor.
Really impressive play from both players here, setting up that endgame Spill Blood, really putting Amy to the test. And Amy having that armor and those shields left over to find themselves in a spot where they could potentially take the tempo back. If I remember correctly, that arsenal, that's a War Tune Herald from an earlier turn, and that's going to provide an awful lot of damage here as it comes swinging in from the arsenal, looking to take away those cards, or maybe the same armor back from Hank in this case.
You know, War Tune Herald, on the face of it, doesn't look very impressive at first. It's like so many other of Prism's Heralds have these on-hit abilities, like making a Spectral Shield or dealing an arcane damage. Just like, War Tune Herald doesn't get that, but it does get to be 1 resource cheaper. And those 2 floating, I bet you they're going to be spent on creating a Spectral Shield this turn as well. That kind of action economy, action efficiency that you get out of Prism is so, so powerful.
Really well navigated by Amy here to get themselves back into this spot. And Hank, now the one with a decision point, was really hoping to draw that hand up and find another one of those incredible poppers that would give them the ability to keep 3 cards here. Instead, they find themselves in a position where they've got to survive 7 damage from a War Tune Herald and keep enough resources going to be able to put the pressure back on in return. We see another Courageous Steel Hand in that hand, another Take Flight in that hand. These are cards that become a little less powerful when you're under so much pressure.
And interestingly, the Brandish and the Courageous Steel Hand are both 2 blocks, which might feel a little bit awkward to work with at this time. But a Steel Hand, I think a Steel Hand could be the thing that clinches this game. Reaction speed damage could really be the way out here. But we're going with the activation of the Halo, I think maybe to try and dig for one of those poppers, or maybe just a hand that defends slightly better than it currently does.
Definitely a great little heads-up play here. We kind of alluded to this earlier in the match, that Halo could be saved for those incredible pinpoint moments.
That's a wry smile. That's a wry smile and a chuckle.
That is a dirty, dirty chuckle.
Oh
no, the nourishing emptiness, the Halo coming in clutch, finding Hank a popper when he needs it the most. But most importantly, perhaps, we're in a spot where that nourishing emptiness blocking only leaves Hank with 2 cards in hand if we're popping that War Tune Herald. It's not like it was there naturally and left Hank with 3 cards to work with. He did have to work for it, but a 2-card hand is still a lot better than what we could have had otherwise. Hank here maybe stealing the tempo back at the very last moment.
Yeah, he's kept a shred here, so we've got not the card shred, rather a shred of tempo as he goes into this turn, but with 2 reds in hand. One of them a 0-cost reaction, but that Brandish, I don't think he's going to be playing it this turn. I feel like this turn might just be Axe and Arsenal, the Courageous Steel Hand, because to me, that's the ticket to victory right now.
For sure. Courageous definitely very likely to be able to squeak a game through if you can leave Prism without Spectral Shields. It looks like Hank has the same kind of thought process as you here. This Hatchet coming on in, this does threaten lethal, which is kind of hilarious. But trying to take a card away from Prism, maybe only have to stare down 1 remaining Herald. Hopefully, use our armor to keep us alive and then sneak that Steel Hand through. This one is coming down to the wire.
we're seeing a block with a red War-Tune Herald here, which has got to make you a little bit concerned about what's left in the hand, if that's the card that's deemed to be worth blocking with.
I'm not sure I'm happy about that or sad about that. Like, if my opponent's blocking with a War-Tooth Herald, like, I guess
Can't be
pros...
good for me.
Pros,
Can't
I'm
be
not
good for
staring
me.
down a War-Tune Herald, but cons, why are they blocking with a War-Tune Herald? We're definitely seeing ourselves here with the Spectral Shield kind of making its way over the line. 4-go again, an exceptionally powerful resource to find ourselves with here in this spot, especially if we can follow it up with another Herald.
Yeah, imagine if Guardians could just swing their hammer and then do something else. That's what Prism's got access to here.
Yeah, the kind of power of Iris of Reality on show here, doing a really good Spears of Surreality impression. This kind of shows you the ability for this deck to kind of do a good impression of what it could do in Classic Constructed. Go wide with those auras chipping away. Instead of 1 power, they have 4 and then get followed up by a big, powerful Herald at the end. Something no other hero in Flesh and Blood really has the ability to do. Hank here kind of deliberating the options that are available to them, leaking a little bit of damage through this shield, and kind of hoping the follow-up is not just absurdly powerful.
Look at the showmanship here. Amy plays down that Enigma Chimera, just saying, come on, you can't have it. And he just tosses it on the table like, yeah, I always had it.
It's always there. It's always there.
He always had it.
Something you quickly learn when you are an illusionist aficionado. If you're worried about them having a popper, they always have the popper. That's how it goes. Invigorating Light there. Once again, letting Hank keep a hand in a spot where he really, really needs to throw back some damage. Now, Bolt of Courage is a super interesting one in a spot like this. This looks blue to me. Bolt of Courage...
It is, I believe.
Curious cards where I really don't want to block this. It's such a minuscule amount of damage, but also... if it hits me, you're drawing a card, which, if you've got a sneaky way of giving this go again, like, oh, I don't know, a Courageous Steel Hand, then maybe I might find myself in a little bit of trouble.
Ooh, okay. So this is one of the points where, as Amy, you think either your hand is complete garbage or you have the nuts in Arsenal. And the nuts here is, as you've already said, that Courageous Steel Hand that we know is there. Now, if Amy has the read that that's what's there, she's going to be blocking this because, well, you can't end up dead to a steel hand now, can you? But if she doesn't have that read, I bet she's thinking, oh, that's only coming in for 1 damage, and I've got 1 Spectral Shield in play. How convenient. No blocks. Oh. So it's time for a soul read.
It is definitely a time for a soul read. And as you say, this really could go either way. This could definitely be a spot that Hank had to use the poppers, so the only attacks he had left over weren't particularly strong. Or this could definitely be a spot where we're trying to cheese you out with that combat trick and steal a win. And it very much is up to Amy as a player here to kind of get a feel for what they think is going on, evaluate their hand, and hopefully in their case have some cards they weren't really going to be able to use effectively anyway, and kind of make sure this game doesn't sneakily slip away.
I will say that I think if Amy does survive this turn, if she reads that I can afford to play around an attack reaction like Courageous Steel Hand here, I see a Phantasmaclasm waiting in there. And that's pretty good at making sure that it doesn't get popped. And if it's not getting popped, that's a 2-card 9. Hello.
Phantasmaclasm, one of my favorite cards that sadly doesn't see as much play in Constructed as we wish. This, as you say, a completely absurd rate kind of piled on with the extra information you get from knowing the contents of your opponent's hand going into their turn. A really, really powerful Majestic if you're able to play it. Definitely looks like Amy kind of going through the ringer here, wants to be able to play it. Kind of really heads up move here as well, just flipping through that graveyard, checking to see what's up. In a format where both players are aware of each other's deck lists, taking a quick count of those Courageous Steel Hands that we are paused on right now, and maybe considering how many of those are available, seems like a really heads up play from Amy here.
Indeed, considering how long this game's gone on so far, I mean, we must be approaching the pitch stack, and I bet Amy's thinking that if those are not all accounted for at this point, then I have a pretty good idea that you have one tucked away there.
Yeah, this is certainly a fantastic heads-up decision from Amy. Just double-checking that information, much like you're very welcome to in a spot like this in a high-pressure game, making sure you don't let it kind of slip away to an errant mistake, something that you definitely should have been able to figure out. Love to see it in a competition of this kind of pedigree. We're still definitely debating it, though, and I can't say I blame them. As you said before, that Spectral Shield just kind of offers to cover this up so nicely, especially if you've got the ability to kind of use all 4 of your cards. This is definitely kind of like a game-winning or game-losing decision in Amy's seat in this case, and I feel like we've said that maybe 3 or 4 times for both players in this game so far.
There has been a lot of back and forth in tempo in this game. I think it's a really fantastic display of what the format can be, and we're going for a block 6 here.
Wow. This is exceptionally respectful to a card like Courageous Steel Hand here from cheesing a game. Maybe we're just in a spot where we want to throw a Herald back. We're willing to give up swinging our Spectral Shield so that we aren't occasionally losing to a Courageous Steel Hand. I definitely like the block here. I think not blocking this and getting yourself cheesed out would be a horrible way to go. But kind of love the amount of respect being given maybe to a sneaky card like Beacon here that may be turning up to kind of steal this game. Really making sure that we aren't accidentally losing to anything in Boltwin's arsenal.
You know, the more I think about it, I think this block 6 is incredibly heads up, because not only is it ensuring that there is no attack reaction that can kill you here, but it also ensures there's no attack reaction that can destroy your Spectral Shield. And that is so much more than just 1 damage prevention at this point in the game. If Amy finds herself in a position where she has a lot of tempo, which it looks like she's about to have with this Phantasmaclasm, then having that Spectral Shield stay around afterwards is going to be huge for ensuring that you can keep spending 4 card hands with Go Again.
That is the face of a man who drew an invigorating light that is no longer in his hand. Phantasmaclasm, showing you the kind of raw power of this card. We don't get to pop it anymore if we pop that back on the bottom of the deck.
Couldn't it just have been on top? Couldn't it just been 1 card lower? But alas, there it was, and now it's gone.
No dice in Hank's case. Instead of the nice clean answer to this Phantasmaclasm, we're going to have to block this whole 9 damage out. Otherwise, well, we lose the game. That's how Flesh and Blood works. And that's a really tough one for Boltwin in a spot like this. We know that Steel Hand is in Arsenal, and you really want to be able to keep some cards to do something with. How on earth do you get around a raw 9 damage here?
Well, unfortunately, no matter how you slice it for Hank here, this is going to translate to 3 cards out of his hand. So he's going to be stuck with just 1 card in hand, and that's Steel Hand. Now, you might think, well, that's great. He can just play the card and then Steel Hand it. But there is that neat little condition on Courageous Steel Hand that you must have charged this turn in order for it to do anything at all. So, unfortunately, it looks like Hank is not going to be able to clinch the win on this following turn. He's just going to have to find a way to survive it, and preferably keep the tempo going through the next turn, but it is not looking good here.
Yeah, this is firmly looking like block o'clock in Hank's case. The armor jumping in front of this Phantasmaclasm, kind of letting us cheat a little bit with how much our hand is able to block, turning 1 card into 4 blocks worth of equipment. Definitely super valuable when you're desperately clinging onto cards to be able to play some kind of functional turn. But Hank definitely not happy about where he is here. This one potentially slowly slipping away. And worth noting, the camera might be lying to me a bit, but I think we might be a little shy of cards in Hank's deck, sorry. In comparison to Amy's here, maybe we're worried about being fatigued.
Well, the other thing about Bolton in particular is that Bolton he's kind of spending half of his deck to end up in his soul. And that's unlike Prism, where it's kind of an additive resource. Oh, my attack hits and it goes to my soul as a bonus. No, as with Bolton, it's a cost. So if you're not using those cards effectively from your soul, then it kind of feels like you have a smaller deck than your opponent. And not just that, these attacks coming out of Prism are huge. They're taking multiple cards to defend every time. We've seen what happens when a Guardian starts just sending attack action after attack action. The opponent's deck just gets whittled away if their life total doesn't. And that's kind of what we're seeing here.
Loving Amy's little glance towards the camera there. The armor had been sitting on the combat chain for a hot second. It's not there anymore. We've changed our mind. We're going to try and save that for one of these big attacks coming later and block out this Phantasmaclasm with a full 3 cards. Just not really finding a way to use kind of all of the resources a hand could offer if we used our armor to keep an extra card. Best just to keep it in the bank for later on. The card that Hank kept, however, just another Courageous Steel Hand. We're sending that Hatchet. This doesn't look impressive, but this is threatening lethal once again. It does demand a block from Amy once more.
Stripping that one card here. Looks like we're opting to give away a yellow, and I think keeping at least 2 blues here makes a lot of sense to me, because one of them is going to get spent on that attack action ability that's granted by the Iris of Reality. We're going to have a Spectral Shield coming in for 4 with Go Again, followed by, I expect, maybe the Angel of Oh, hello. Okay, we've opted to just go for the Angel here. Maybe we were short on blues in this hand.
Yeah, good chance maybe that Wartune Herald is just not blue. Maybe we're worried about not being able to pay for the follow-up in this case. Keeping an Arsenal here, definitely a very heads-up position, because this Herald very likely to earn cards from Hank anyway. As I said before, I think Hank is definitely heading more towards the route of being fatigued here. Stripping cards away might just be equally as valuable as threatening damage in a spot like this.
I think the biggest boon to Amy's position here is the fact that she knows that the second card from the bottom is Hank's last popper. There is no concern about having Phantasm being triggered here. She just gets to full send and not worry about it. And the advantage that comes out of that is huge, because by the time that popper comes back around, well, Hank's not going to have enough deck to close the game, probably.
That is a fantastic, very heads-up point. Hank finding themselves in a rather awkward spot here as well with the hand they have, but this armor being saved kind of coming in clutch here. Really sad to lose this second swing. We saw it pitched away in the early game. Sad that it never came back to fruition, but that yellow there, letting us use our armor and keep 2 cards, might give us the ability to get back into this one if we can attack multiple times into Amy here.
Okay, so Hank on a 3-card hand here where we know one of those cards is a Courageous Steel Hand, and oh, this seems like a pretty familiar situation. It's just a charge card. Don't worry about the Arsenal.
We've been here before. Bolt of Courage, once again, kind of showing you the kind of flexibility it offers a deck like Bolton. Normally, that card draw on hit would be worth a little bit more, but in this case, it has the best on hit in Flesh and Blood, and that is my opponent loses the game. Once again, demanding some respect from Amy. And in this case, she doesn't know that Arsenal is a Courageous Steel Hand, so it's very possible this is being followed up by another 0-cost attack, meaning she's got to be super respectful about being forced to block here. Once again, respect being given to those combat tricks that might be in the arsenal, blocking 6 on this Bolt of Courage.
I think she had the firm read that it was there all along. This is some very, very impressive play, and we're actually seeing she took a damage there, but I think that should be the Spectral Shield that was popped instead. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it looks like maybe a small oversight from the players there. The Spectral Shield is definitely mandatory. We all wish we could keep them around to keep attacking with instead of giving them up if we didn't have to.
Well,
but seems
I guess Amy did here, so lucky her.
Seems like it. That's only fair based on earlier on that we have a small mistake go the other way. Spectral Shield here, definitely super valuable, allowing us to be able to attack twice. So the shield coming in, pressuring Hank in this case, and kind of, again, showing you the ability for Prism to really utilize those and why they are so important in limited games of Monarch.
Pressuring for 4, no less, as well. I mean, like, there is, I think, one card in the set that actually is capable of blocking for 4 in this situation. It's called Rise Above, and I don't think that's even what Hank wants to see here. Hank is definitely going to be giving away 2 cards here in order to block this 4 completely, and then he's got a Herald to worry about. But we've looped back around to the pitch stack, which means we know at least the Herald is accounted for with an Invigorating Light.
I'm not sure how important that pitch stack is. If you take a look at the top of the screen, you might notice there's a suspiciously empty zone in between the Banished and Graveyard. Hank there down to his last chunk of cards. I don't really see a way for us to keep enough pressure here to be able to push back and save ourselves from this shield and this Herald. It does look like the players
have understood.
Yeah, there we
understood
go.
what happened in the last turn cycle.
Okay, this changes things pretty dramatically. This could be one whole less attack coming in from Amy in this case, meaning Hank might have some breathing room to work with after all with that last handful of cards. Nice catch. Good to see things like that being kind of remedied to keep this final so fair and equal for both players. A lot at stake here, so understandable. The pressure's on. These things slip through the cracks. Amy got to revisit the drawing board here. If we don't have a Herald to attack with, maybe last turn's blocks don't feel quite as good anymore. What's the plan now? It's a Herald of Tenacity. That one's got Dominate.
Dominate probably suggests lethal here, but, well, I keep coming back to it. I think that Invigorating Light might be the difference between winning and losing here. This game has come down so much to the wire that this one difference, having access to that Spectral Shield or not having access to it, completely flips the outcome of the game, I think.
This is an incredibly interesting spot here. As you say, this Herald almost certainly going to be addressed by that Engulfing Light in this case, meaning Hank will have 4 cards to work with in order to take away that final 2 life from Amy. In Amy's case, the win condition of this game has changed dramatically. It feels like the end mission of Halo Reach, there's a big old survive flashing up on the screen. All we've got to do is block. If we can keep ourselves alive in this spot, we're in a fantastic position. Hank's got no deck. This is the final barrage of damage. Can we make it to the end?
Yeah, with a hand like this, I mean, we do know that there's that blue Courageous Steel hand in there. That's kind of the last instant speed combat trick we have going. Otherwise, I think we're kind of just down to what you see is what you get. And with so few cards left, we don't really even have the ability to charge the soul very much anymore. But let's see. Hank has played across the line here, and we might be seeing a charge.
Definitely feels like the way to go. Charging turns on this steel hand at least gives us the ability to give this go again once it has to be blocked by Amy, thanks to putting a card into the soul. Means we can follow up with a hatchet and kind of pressure a little bit more damage. Sadly, I'm not sure 2 attacks is enough here to get through that 4-card hand.
I mean, the good news is it shouldn't be 2 here. I think it should be 3 because the reaction is going to give this cross the line go again. We're then going to be swinging the axe, which is still lethal, mind you, and has to be blocked.
There's more
because
soul
of that, Bolton's
under
ability,
there. You're right.
There is plenty of soul under there.
Oh, with the soul being stacked up on the Boltwin, I lost my count. I assumed we were maybe down to the end of it, but no, we can go once again. The steel hand here coming over the top, but it's only for 1.
Not to give it go again.
Well, we out of resources.
Not to give it go again here because I mean, there's no resources left.
We're out of resources.
Yeah, we only pitched a yellow there, so we're down to 1 card left.
Oh no, 1 card left here. The cross the line, not quite enough to send another hatchet Amy's way, and 1 card is not going to keep you safe from a War Tune Herald. That one is going to be taken away.
What an unbelievable conclusion to this game. My goodness.
What a sweat. Both players down to the wire there. Tempo swinging back and forth, leaving Hank staring at that last cross the line, desperately hoping for it to gain a little bit more power. But no, the finals here coming to an end. Boltwin and Hank taking the loss. Amy gaining back that prestige courtesy of winning this last box for a box battle. Really lovely to see them kind of clawing back at the end and earning that incredible Golden Goblin Chalice for themselves. I can't wait to hear from both the players about what they have to say, about how they felt during that game. So let's not hold anything back. Let's head on down to the floor and have a word with them and see how they felt about that match.
So if you guys know anything about our origin story, it all started with these beautiful Monarch Blitz decks, right?
It did.
And Prism was a pretty card that got Amy into the game and allowed her to continue to dominate me and not allow me to win.
It was satisfying.
So it's only fitting that Amy gets on the winner's bracket.
Leaderboard.
And it is my duty, but I'm not proud of it. But I guess this is yours now.
Hello. Welcome home.
Wow. Lovely to hear it from both players there. I can't think of a better way for an event like this to finish. Congratulations once again to Amy for taking out this final, and commiserations there to Hank for coming up just a little bit short, but an impressive second place finish nonetheless. Shahmir, what do you think of that?
I mean, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. I think if you have a Prism deck that looks like, you should just say, cool, I'll take my trophy now, I'll take first place and all of that jazz. But, you know, Hank put up an absolutely incredible fight with that deck. I think the back and forth that we saw in that game was absolutely on a wire. One thing being slightly different in that final could have completely flipped the result. I think it was one of the most interactive and close games of Flesh and Blood that I have seen on stream in a very long time. And I am feeling so privileged to have been able to cast it.
What an incredible final. Very much the same kind of feeling here. Very lucky to have been involved in an event just like that's this one. With that said, that is going to bring us to an end of today's coverage. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully, we'll see you again very soon. If you want to find me online anywhere or want to commentate an event of your own, you can find me at HowlingMines across the internet. In a similar vein, Shahmir, where can people find you if they want to see more of what you're up to?
You can find me at Shahmir Samee for your latest news on Flesh and Blood and my information on coaching and on casting.
You love to see it. I've been HowlingMines, that's been Shahmir, and most importantly, you've been amazing. But until next time, this has been the channel here at Goblin Reserve. Hopefully, we'll see you again very soon. Have a good one.
Till next time. Yeah,
Yep.
you got it. You got it. You
Cool,
know,
cool,
you know,
cool.
you got it.
You got it, you're good. But yeah, we'll keep it rolling so that Hank's got his stink mark. Welcome back, folks, to, let's try that again. I fucked that up immediately. Good stuff.
Great. Lovely.
Okay.
Gosh, dang it, dude. What a game.